Stay tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. Joan served the state of California as a member on the Arts Council and on the Film Commission. She was formerly on the Architectural Commission and fulfilled 2 terms on the Fine Arts Commission for the city of Beverly Hills. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview magazine, Condé Nast Publications, and the Hearst Corporation, Joan covered the world of fashion, the mysteries of food, the excitement of theater, and the international art scene. She continues to find people who are on the cutting edge of their professions. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. We're taping here at the Hollywood Museum in the historic Max Factor building, and our guests are author William Hackman and actor Jack Fry. William Hackman was born in Kansas City and raised in Chicago and Los Angeles. He has a Bachelor of Arts in English from UCLA and a Master in History from UC Irvine. He's worked as a reporter for Time magazine before going to the J. Paul Getty Trust. And we're going to talk about his book, which is called Out of Sight, published by Other Press in New York. But you have a background in English and history. What did you cover at Time magazine as a journalist?
I was sort of a back of the book jack of all trades. Back of the book, for people who don't know, means everything from the business section back, not the front of the book, not the politics.
Not social.
Or
pop a little bit?
A little bit. Modern living, as I think we used to call it.
Modern living, right.
And arts and entertainment.
Yeah,
and
were you a part of that?
Yeah, that was my usual beat, yeah.
And then as a freelancer, could you go out on your own and find work?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's only so much room in time in any given week.
And so you could work on your own?
Yeah, and I was free to pitch stories elsewhere that weren't appropriate for the magazine. It's a news magazine, so they need a news angle, and so there were lots of things.
What took you out? What was more interesting than the back of the book kind of thing? Back of the magazine, I should say, right?
Well, yeah, right. No, but we did say back of the book. It was a lot of fun. It was I met wonderful people. I did wonderful things and went to great places. But at a certain point, I felt like other people were doing really meaningful things with their lives, and I was just writing about it.
Oh, that's interesting. As a freelance journalist, you would be writing about interesting people, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they were doing interesting things, social causes or in the arts or whatever, and I was thinking, I'm just sort of an observer recording it. Maybe it's time to move to the other side of the fence.
That's interesting. I never thought about that from a journalistic point of view. Then what took you to the Getty? Because that was such an about face, really, and so different from what you were doing.
Well, it was and it wasn't. I mean, I do have that academic background. I was working on a PhD after the MA, and I had gone to Europe to do research. And
but what were you researching?
Well, my dissertation was going to be actually on sort of the French, the German who had to flee Germany in the Nazi period and live in Paris.
Oh.
So it was sort of looking at the Paris in the 30s and the Germans who were living.
And there's so much written about that right now.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic.
It really was.
It's a really fabulous
unbelievable,
topic.
Yeah. So that changed.
That changed. I mean, I'd always wanted to do this particular book, but the basic point is that I had both an academic background and a journalistic background. So being in the public affairs department at the Getty, where I could easily talk to PhDs and translate their ideas into something more accessible.
So it wasn't as different as I thought it was, because you were in the marketing.
Yeah, it's a fairly straightforward.
I see. But you did write a book called Inside the Getty, or some paper?
No, that was a book, but that was a book that the Getty later hired me to write.
But so it wasn't critical in any way. It
must
have been very straightforward.
It's very straightforward. It's basically to explain to people what all of goes on in the buildings that aren't the museum, because there are a lot of fascinating things going on.
And so, what did it cover?
Well, the Conservation Institute, their laboratories, the kinds of research they do, the historical research at the Getty Research Institute.
So it covered a lot of things that
Yeah.
people don't know about.
Exactly, right.
And was it on the market, or was it just given at the Getty? Or
No, it's for sale in various places, mostly at the Getty in their bookshop. It's I think a few other places.
so during the time you were there at the Getty, did you think of writing out of sight?
I thought of writing out of sight as early as I mean the early '80s. What happened is
Oh, way back.
way back.
Because you were you're in the '90s. You were at the Getty.
Right. I mean, in a sense, this goes all the way back to my teens and my introduction to some of the people who I write about.
Is that right?
I was 14 when we came to LA in '68 and attended some local exhibitions and didn't understand any
And
of
what
the work.
school were you going to? It was junior high and high school,
That was
right?
junior high and high school at that point.
And
right.
where were you living?
Well, we lived around. We had moved around several times, and during the summer of '68, many people can't believe this, but my parents, who had lots to do back on the East Coast, basically put my brother and me in a hotel on Wilshire Boulevard called the Cavalier.
Oh, I remember.
Remember the Cavalier? Before there were high rises in
Right.
Wilshire. And we lived there in the summer of 1968.
The two of you together?
Yeah.
Isn't that
You know,
great?
he was 19 and I was 14, and we were loose in.
Oh, you were 14? That was very young.
And we were loose in this city where, you know, it was full of hippies and political radicals. And
And Wilshire was like, was it mid-Wilshire?
it was just a little bit east of Westwood. Walking distance to ships.
Right. Oh, that's great. So then you were aware of the gallery scene.
I
and
became
that.
a little bit
Yeah.
aware of it then, and then as I got slightly older, I met some people who were artists.
And
little
that
by
group
little-
was?
Well, initially there was a painter named Margaret Nielsen who became a close friend of mine, and then through
I know
her-
Margaret very
Oh, there
well.
you go.
Yes,
And then
because
through-
Margaret was living with George Herms for
And
a
I was
while.
going to say, and then I met George, and George, if you know him, then you know he's quite a raconteur.
If you know him, you love him.
Yeah, and he's
I
full of
love him.
stories, and he and
He's
I
great.
crisscrossed Southern California, going to the jazz clubs, and
So he was a big influence.
George was a big influence early on. Yeah,
And Margaret was a really terrific artist.
Margaret was
or
and
is
a
still.
terrific artist, and I still see her quite frequently.
Does she live in LA still, or is she in
Ventura.
Europe? Oh, in Ventura. Mm-hmm. So here we have Out of Sight. So how was it finally born?
Well, after I left the Getty, I mean, I had wanted to work on this, but you know, working at the Getty, leading up to the opening of the Getty Center, it was just impossible to find time. So after I left the Getty, I decided to get fairly serious about it, and then finally in around 2007 or so, I decided to put all other projects on hold and just focus on the book.
So how long did it take you to write it?
Well, I mean, I wrote bits of it while I was at the Getty, but really concentrated writing was from about 2008 to 2011.
And then how did you physically do it? On the computer? Because some people still use a yellow pad.
You know, I'm one of those people. I do. I go back and forth. I mean, I'm antsy when I'm writing, and I need to sort of pace, and so sometimes a pad is better for me. Sometimes I can sit at the computer. I always use both in one way or the other.
So, what's the title mean? What does the title mean? I have had such a hard time with this title because I was in New York last week with Bob Irwin. He opened at the Pace Gallery, and I said, "Oh, you're the big guru in Bill Hackman's new book." And he went, "Oh, I don't know about that book." And then I couldn't tell him the title because I can't remember it. Out of Sight.
Well, Bob has forgotten about the book, I guess, but that's fine. He's a busy man.
It was at the opening, and there were a lot of people.
Yeah, no,
and
that's perfectly understandable.
it was beautiful. It was work from the 70s and 80s. It was so beautiful, and it's what you talk about,
and things like
because
that.
that's what he was known for,
Yeah,
right? And you talk
yeah,
a lot
absolutely,
about the art,
absolutely.
light and space.
Right. Well, the title, I basically had sort of three things in mind. One is just the 60s exclamation, you know, out of sight.
Oh, it's Out of Sight? Okay, I
But-
got it.
more to the point was that this work was unknown and particularly ignored from the New York perspective.
What
So
work
it was
are you
out
talking
of
about?
sight. The work of the 60s that I write about in the book.
But
was
it's
out of
60s
sight.
and 70s, right?
It's mostly 60s, a little bit of the early 70s.
Okay,
Or
all
actually,
right.
I should say as early as the late 50s.
That's what I thought
Yeah.
was the meaning, that it was out of sight because it wasn't a focus of the art people here.
Exactly.
Or
Well,
in New York.
Or in New York especially. And then the last thing was that LA art, as opposed to New York art, was very focused on perception and on vision. And so many of the artists, particularly somebody like Bob Irwin, I mean, it's all about your ability to look and see. And the back cover of the book is, in fact, one of Bob Irwin looking at one of his stripe paintings.
Oh, let me say that, because I wanted to just show this. Oh, it's hard to see the
It's a little bit
stripe
harder
painting.
to type, but yeah, and
but
it's
it
very,
is-
there's not a lot of contrast.
I see, I
But
see.
Bob is looking at that painting in his studio.
And this is from the 60s. We're talking 2000, mid 2000s here.
Right.
And he just did a fantastic piece at Cedars-Sinai Hospital.
Yeah, that's
in
a
the new
wonderful piece
building,
for everybody
isn't
to
it?
drive by and see it.
And it's up all the time, and it just says something.
Oh, it's fabulous.
Okay, so he's covered a long
He's
space
certainly one
of
of the
time.
major figures in the book. Yeah.
So was he a big influence on why you wrote it? Did you talk to him a lot?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I say early on in the book that in a way there are two really influential figures among the artists. Edward
Oh, right,
Kienholz,
Kienholz, right.
and Robert Irwin, and they influence sort of different lines of thinking in LA art.
And you were interviewing these people. So when I was reading it, I go back to what you were saying, like so-and-so said this, and so-and-so said this. And I was wondering where that research came from and how you found what these people were saying.
Right.
Walter Hopps.
Right.
And
Some of it is from interviews I did over the years. As I said, this goes back to the 80s, and I interviewed some of these people in the 80s.
it's such a good read, and
you.
thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks for watching. We'll be right back with actor Jack Fry. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back. We're at the Hollywood Museum, and I'm with actor, teacher Jack Fry, an award-winning playwright and fully credentialed teacher who lives in Los Angeles. But the Indiana native studied with the Meisner technique, the Shakespeare Company, and Adam Rourke's film acting lab. His work has taken him on stages all over the world, and at the London Fringe Festival, he was awarded Best Actor for his Einstein solo performance. What was your major in college?
My major in college was TV, journalism, TV film, broadcast journalism / with some hyphens.
Well, then how do we get to the teaching credential?
Well, both my parents were, education was very stressed. My dad went to Harvard, my mom went to Cornell, so they were both well educated, and they wanted me to be educated. So education was always forefront
Right.
of my. So when then I had to, I came here and I thought, well, I got into substitute school teaching. Eventually, I got my credential, teach full time, and so.
So you never took teaching courses,
I did.
basically. Where did you go to school?
I went to Southern Methodist University, but I went through the DI program, which is called the District Intern Program here, where it's sort of a rush. It's not, you can still get fully credentialed, but they put you into a classroom and you take classes simultaneously.
So that led you to be able to take the test and get
Right.
credentialed here. I see, I see.
Exactly.
But when you went to Southern Methodist, what
That's a
career path, Southern Methodist, what career path were you going to take?
Well, I was doing performing there, some stand-up comedy and things like that on stages. I'd opened up for Elvis impersonator. I was an opener at a few places. So I was performing, but I also wanted to learn behind the scenes. And I still use those skills today. So I came out to LA, getting into acting was really, tough. It's
Yeah,
a
did
tough
you
thing.
have a connection when you came out? I mean,
Not really. A mutual friend. One was a big connection. Tom Blomquist, who happens to be the director for the Einstein Show. He was a great connect. Ended up being my mentor.
oh, that's great.
Yeah, and so we've had a wonderful creative relationship for a few decades.
So now you're here in LA, and
now.
you're teaching, and you're also performing. I think let's talk about Call Me Mr. Fry, because that has comedy, drama, everything involved. And was it a one-person play?
It's a one-person show, and that is sort of my quote-unquote masterpiece, in my opinion, humble opinion.
Is
But-
it?
Well, I mean,
Because it
I've
was your
done-
first one,
It's
right?
my first one, but I've done 150 rewrites of it until I just constantly challenge the material. But now I wouldn't change a word of it, and I've done that close to 300 times now. All Mexico twice, Canada, all over North America.
But in what kind of venues?
All types of venues, performing arts centers. I actually did a show in the Lyndon B. Johnson Auditorium in Washington, D.C., where the Department of Education is, where Obama always gives his speeches for education. Ani Duncan was there in the audience and saw the show.
It was a great success. You had
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah, I did two of
interesting
them there.
people come
Yeah,
to see it,
all,
right?
I had 2 audiences of 500 of all the people that make the legislation, educational laws the federal laws that are mandated.
And why were they so taken with it? What's the story?
Well, it's about a first-year teacher who's sort of innocent, and he goes in and he wants to change the world, and it's really, I mean, it's a true story, and it's a combination of comedy and drama. It's sort of I would say it's Animal House meets To Sir with Love.
And your students were calling you Mr. Fry, right? It was a
Yeah.
fifth grade class?
Yeah, it's a 5th grade class. I teach 5th grade.
And
Yes.
so, you teach fifth
Yeah.
grade all the time?
Yeah.
And how do you get away from the class to do these gigs that you do?
Well, a lot of them are during the summer.
Ah,
And I have a very awesome principal who lets me, well, if I don't take too much of a chunk, and usually the times that I go are usually a long weekend. It's like a Wednesday through a Sunday.
and you don't have
So-
to put a lot of rehearsal time into it, obviously, at the venue.
Right, because it's already set. And all
Right.
they have to do is just build the set, do their marketing. I fly in, do the show, fly out.
Well, but tell me what Mr. Fry was about. What are some of the lines and
Oh, God, I got some of the Einstein lines.
No, we're
Mr.
going to talk
Fry-
about the Einstein, but I mean, why? What were your
It-
students
It's about
doing?
my relationship with 2 children
Oh, two.
and how we affected each other's lives. One of the kids, his uncle dies, and the other one is very needy and lonesome. And it's a show that really has a lot of drama in it, and it's told with real student artifacts, and it's a multimedia show, like my Einstein show.
And did you change the wording a lot? You said you rewrote it a lot.
I didn't change the wording. The drama of this show hasn't changed a word since I started, but it
this
was the
was
comedy around it.
I see that you have to add.
Yeah, that I interweave. So it's really, people see it. You're laughing one minute and you're crying the very next.
But that's what happens. I taught down on 52nd Street,
really?
and for a
What
long
did you
time.
teach?
I taught first grade, but I had children that had so many problems
Yeah.
that we were solving problems along with trying to educate.
Yeah, that's a real
And
challenge.
it sounds like that's what you were going through in your fifth grade class.
Yes, it's a personal experience. It's the drama behind the classroom door.
Yeah, which other people don't understand.
No, they don't. And I hadn't, been in elementary school for quite a number of years. So when getting back into teach, I go, oh yeah, there's recess. Oh yeah, okay, kids go out for recess. Okay, and then
You're like
yeah.
fights on the playground and all
Oh,
this.
yeah.
But
But-
anyway, you were in a lot of independent films, and you've been on a lot of stages. What kind of films were you in?
I did one called The Salmon Run, which was a really good show about a guy whose was dying of cancer. It's a real comedy.
I know.
And,
We've got like
I
heavy
know.
duty here.
But it was really good. And then I did one with Jessica Tandy, the Story Lady, and I was featured in that one. And I just did a comedy pilot called Whoa.
What about the stage? Do you do other people's work or only your own?
I do, but lately my own has just been taking so much charge. I haven't had time to do anybody else's.
Okay, let's talk about why it's taking charge. First of all, the Call Me Mr. Fry has a long background, DC, all over the world too, right? But now Einstein. Why Einstein after a 5th grade class? This is like going the opposite way.
It was. That's a great question. I was going to do Mr. Fry too, but I decided, I wanted to spread my wings a little bit artistically, and I've always been interested in metaphysics, meaning ESP, things we can't see, sliding doors, or as astroplanning. I thought, what does Einstein think about this? Because it's quantum physics. And
I was going to say, were you a math major?
I wasn't, but I'm an armchair math major appreciator.
Are you good? Can you figure things out?
No.
But you had to go, you did this great research and you had 15,000 documents to go through.
It's amazing.
I mean, were they math documents?
No, they're letters. They're letters back and forth. They have those, but I didn't. That's Greek to me. So, but then I stumbled upon this story, which ended up being to me more fascinating. And what's interesting about Albert Einstein is that people didn't know he was married until the 80s, 30 years after his
the
death.
80s?
The
Because
80s.
I was going to ask you what this actual story of Einstein is. He got a divorce, or he couldn't get a divorce.
Yeah, he was struggling to get a divorce. It got stretched out, but he ended up finally getting one. But no one knew he was married to Mileva until the 80s, so he's very secretive. When Einstein died, literally hour after he died, the Israeli Guard came into Princeton University with trucks, and they hauled all his boxes. He came from the writing generation, the letter generation. So imagine hundreds of boxes. And every 10 or 15 years, Hebrew University will let out a little bit more information. A new book will be written, a new bestseller. And this time around, it was Walter Isaacson, Einstein's Life and His Universe, which were based on this release. And so coming across these, I just found this incredible story that no one knew. It was about his fight for relativity in around the early teens during the war was happening. Berlin was crumbling. He had people trying to steal his theories. He had people who believed in his theories trying to steal them, yet he was up against the establishment who thought, what, bending of time and space, you got to be crazy. Messy divorce, kid with his loves and adores slipping through his fingers.
So he was dealing with this marital problems and fatherhood,
Yes.
and health
Divorce.
issues.
Health issues too, because he was all the stress was he had stomach ulcers that he was inherited by his mother. So he would literally couldn't get out of bed, and he had once they thought it was proven a huge scientific bashlag saying, "Oh, you're right, Einstein," but no, you're wrong. So.
But how could they steal his theories? I mean, they
Well,
were
it's
all...
really whoever publishes something first is
Yeah,
able to
that's what I
go
thought.
to claim.
Right.
But he had published a lot of incorrect versions, and so people were going, "You don't know how to do it. I'll get this right."
Oh,
And people,
Einstein had published wrong
yeah.
on purpose, or
Well,
just
no,
because that was
because
his
it's
theory?
so complicated.
I see.
And
I see.
it's a little bit off. It's a little bit off. He published 5 incorrect versions.
Wow. So when you produce this on stage, you're there alone. I see you have like ups and downs on the stage set.
Right. I have different levels to
And
help
you're-
us create in and out of time.
And that tells the time.
Well, the story's
sequence.
linear, but he steps out, talks to the audience. I do it as Einstein coming back from the dead, so he has a modern perspective.
And you're in what kind of costume? Like
Well-
a 70s big
Well,
wide lapels?
Yeah, it looks like a 70s, but it's supposed to be him dressed at that time period.
I see. And
So-
then your director, you have a director,
I have
obviously.
a fantastic director, Tom Blomquist, a fantastic vocal coach and assistant director, Peggy O'Neill, and a wonderful technical director, John Toome. So I've got a great team around me, and they've made this thing, it's taken off. It's great.
And now the last production was at the Santa Monica Playhouse.
Playhouse,
And
yes.
where else will you take it?
I'm going to Manila in July for a month. Very
Oh,
excited,
great.
taking the show there.
In July, the
in
summer
July.
months, right?
So, and then I'm taking it to Detroit and Northern California. And, yeah,
Fantastic.
it's great.
Will it be made into a film?
I think it should be. I think it should
Can
be.
you do that?
I would love to. Maybe you can help me.
Maybe we'll. Hello out
with
there.
your Hollywood
Can
connections.
we help Jack Fry make this into a film? The other thing, give us a line of Einstein. Do you change your voice?
Yeah, okay, so let's say the setup is Einstein has just gotten off the phone with his wife, Mileva just hung up on him because they're arguing about custody of the kids, okay? So it'd be sort of like, marriage is the unsuccessful attempt to make something lasting out of an incident. All marriage is dangerous. Women marry men hoping they will change, but men marry women hoping they will not, so each is disappointed. Sex. Sex is the price you ladies must pay for marriage. But marriage is the price we men must pay for sex. Is that fair?
That's right. That's so true.
So, he talks to the audience. He breaks the fourth wall to conclude the audience. Then he'll create scenes and create other characters to bring you into the drama. No one's ever done a one-person show like this. They always do the like the Mark Twain narrative,
To
one
them,
person.
right. That's what I was going to ask you. Does the audience respond? Do you hear people responding to you?
Oh, yes, that's the
Yes?
greatest thing about live performance. That's why we do it. That's why we do it.
Well, I'm glad that you came and told us about it. It's a very interesting thing because it's so personal, right?
Yes.
Einstein's life is so personal. And also, they call me Mr. Fry. Very personal.
There would be no Einstein if there was not They Call Me Mr. Fry.
Thanks, Mr. Jack Fry. Thanks,
Thank
Mr.
you. So
Fry.
good to see you. I love it. You look wonderful.
Thank you very much.
You're very hot.
Thank you. Thanks for watching the Joan Quinn Profiles. Write to us at JAQUINN1 at AOL.com. Bye.